In the
I didn't
quiet
mean to
suburb
do
of
it.
Maplewood,
It was an
nestled on the
accident.
outskirts of a mid-sized city,
I didn't mean to do
the
it.
calm of an early spring evening in February 2024 was shattered by an incident that would soon grip the community in a cloud of confusion and fear. At approximately 7:15 p.m., emergency services received a frantic call reporting a violent altercation at a residence on Willow Lane. Upon arrival, officers found a 16-year-old boy, Michael Harper, standing outside the home, visibly shaken and covered in blood. Nearby, inside the living room, lay 17-year-old Ethan Collins, unconscious and bleeding from multiple wounds. Michael's first words to responding officers were terse and filled with disbelief. It was an accident. The statement, repeated several times with growing insistence, suggested a tragic mishap rather than a deliberate attack. Paramedics rushed Ethan to the hospital, where his condition was reported as critical but stable. The neighborhood, known for its safety and close-knit residents, was stunned. How could such violence erupt in a place where children played freely and neighbors gathered on porches to share evening conversations? Before we jump into this gripping tale of youth, conflict, and the search for justice, don't forget to subscribe and like the video to stay updated with our latest stories. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how we handle violence among teens? Detective Laura Sanchez was assigned to the case almost immediately. Having considerable experience with youth-related incidents, she arrived at the scene with a keen eye for detail and a deep understanding of the delicate balance between adolescent impulsiveness and intentional violence. From her first moments at the house, she sensed something was amiss. Michael's demeanor, while outwardly distressed, seemed rehearsed. His answers overly precise, his agitation controlled rather than raw. The living room bore the marks of a struggle. Furniture was overturned, a glass coffee table shattered into sharp fragments across the carpet. Blood spatters dotted the walls and floor, each pattern telling a story of the violent encounter that had unfolded. Michael's clothes were stained, not just with his own blood, but with Ethan's as well. Paramedics noted defensive wounds on Ethan's arms and bruises on his face, consistent with a sustained attack rather than a single accidental injury. As Detective Sanchez began her preliminary questioning, Michael stuck to his narrative. An accident during a heated argument. "We were just messing around. It got out of hand," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt him." His voice trembled slightly, but his eyes avoided direct contact. Officers noted that his story lacked the spontaneity expected from someone who had just witnessed or caused a traumatic event. Instead, it felt rehearsed, as though he had already anticipated the questions and prepared answers. Neighbors who had heard the commotion offered conflicting accounts. Some described loud shouting and the sound of breaking objects minutes before the 911 call. Others mentioned seeing Michael and Ethan exit the house arguing heatedly, but none witnessed the actual assault. This uncertainty only deepened the puzzle. Why would two teenagers, known to be friends, suddenly engage in a physical confrontation so severe it nearly killed one of them? Detective Sanchez requested the immediate collection of any available evidence, including surveillance footage from nearby homes and street cameras. She also ordered a forensic team to comb through the scene for physical clues that might clarify the sequence of events. Meanwhile, she arranged for Michael to be taken to the station for a more in-depth interview, accompanied by a legal guardian and a youth advocate to ensure his rights were protected. At the station, Michael's story remained consistent but thin on detail. He described a playful wrestling match between friends that escalated unpredictably. "Ethan fell and hit his head," he insisted. "I tried to help him, but then he started coughing up blood." Yet his account failed to explain the bruises on Ethan's arms or the broken furniture. Detective Sanchez pressed gently but firmly, sensing that behind the carefully chosen words lay a more troubling truth. The community's reaction was swift and vocal. Parents expressed fear for their own children's safety. Local schools increased security measures, and social media buzzed with speculation. Some rallied around Michael, citing his history as a good kid caught in a moment of poor judgment. Others feared he might be hiding something far more sinister. The local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a critical test of how the justice system handles violent incidents involving minors. In the days following the attack, Detective Sanchez coordinated with medical staff at the hospital to monitor Ethan's recovery and gather information about his injuries. The attending physicians confirmed the severity of the wounds. Lacerations consistent with blunt force trauma, defensive injuries, and signs of a prolonged struggle. These medical details contradicted Michael's claim of an accidental fall, suggesting that the incident was far more violent and intentional than initially portrayed. During follow-up interviews, Michael's responses became increasingly guarded. He avoided eye contact and provided minimal information, often repeating the phrase, "It was an accident," like a mantra. His behavior raised further suspicions among the investigators. Detective Sanchez noted that while adolescents can sometimes minimize their involvement out of fear or confusion, the consistency and rehearsed nature of Michael's statements indicated possible deception. As the investigation deepened, patterns began to emerge. Neighbors recalled previous arguments between the two teenagers, though none had escalated to physical violence before. School counselors mentioned recent tensions over social issues and peer relationships that had created friction. Detective Sanchez began to consider the possibility that the attack was not spontaneous, but a culmination of escalating conflict. The evidence collected at the scene added weight to these concerns. Forensic analysts identified multiple points of impact on Ethan's body, indicating repeated blows rather than a single accidental fall. The overturned furniture and scattered belongings suggested a struggle that lasted several minutes, inconsistent with a sudden mishap. Additionally, small details, such as the positioning of blood droplets and the trajectory of wounds, hinted at deliberate movements rather than a chaotic accident. Throughout this phase, Detective Sanchez maintained a careful balance, treating Michael with the respect due to a juvenile suspect while rigorously pursuing the facts. She understood the complexities involved when dealing with minors, especially in cases where intent and responsibility are difficult to discern. Her approach was methodical, ensuring that every piece of evidence was scrutinized and every statement verified. Meanwhile, Michael's family was caught in a maelstrom of emotions. His parents expressed shock and disbelief, insisting their son was incapable of such violence. They cooperated fully with authorities, but also sought legal counsel to protect Michael's rights. Friends and acquaintances offered mixed opinions, some defending Michael's character, others questioning the circumstances that led to the violent encounter. As the investigation progressed beyond the initial shock, the community grappled with the implications. Was this a tragic accident caused by youthful recklessness, or the result of a calculated act of aggression? Detective Sanchez's instincts told her the truth lay beneath the surface of Michael's repeated claims. The phrase, "it was an accident," became a focal point, both a plea and a challenge for investigators determined to uncover what really happened on Willow Lane that night. In these early stages, no formal charges had been filed. The police were still piecing together the timeline and gathering testimonies. But the tension was palpable in the air, as the lines between victim and suspect began to blur. Detective Sanchez prepared for the difficult road ahead, knowing that the case would test not only the evidence, but the community's ability to confront uncomfortable truths about violence among its youth. The night's events had fractured the illusion of safety in Maplewood, leaving a neighborhood to wonder how well they truly knew the teenagers living in their midst, and what consequences awaited when a moment of conflict turned into something far darker than anyone had anticipated. In the days following the violent altercation on Willow Lane, the investigation took a decisive turn as Detective Laura Sanchez and her team began a thorough crime scene analysis. The living room where Ethan Collins had been attacked was sealed off as a forensic unit meticulously combed through every detail, seeking clues that might unravel the mystery behind the teen's near-fatal injuries. The initial impression of an accidental injury was rapidly challenged by the mounting physical evidence, which painted a far more complex and troubling picture. The scene bore unmistakable signs of a struggle. The once orderly room was now a chaotic tableau. Chairs overturned, cushions torn, and shards of a broken glass coffee table scattered across the floor. Blood spatters were analyzed with precision, revealing patterns inconsistent with a single fall or accidental contact. Instead, the distribution and direction of the blood droplets suggested multiple impacts and movements, indicating that Ethan had been assaulted with force and intent. Among the most critical findings was the discovery of a blunt object beneath a sofa cushion, a heavy metal candlestick holder smeared with blood. Forensic experts confirmed that the blood on the object matched Ethan's DNA, and trace amounts of Michael Harper's fingerprints were found on its surface. The presence of the candlestick, combined with the injury sustained, indicated the weapon used in the attack, contradicting Michael's claims that no weapon had been involved. The timeline of the attack was reconstructed with the help of witness statements and digital evidence. Neighbors reported hearing escalating voices around 7 p.m., followed by sounds of crashing and thuds lasting several minutes before the emergency call was placed at 7:15 p.m. A nearby home's doorbell camera captured fleeting images of Michael leaving the house shortly after the disturbance, his face flushed and hands stained with blood. Detective Sanchez and her team also searched the backyard and surrounding areas for additional evidence. Footprints and scuff marks suggested a hurried exit route, with signs that someone had attempted to clean up blood traces near the back door. A torn piece of fabric matching Michael's jacket was found caught on a fence, further indicating a frantic escape. Interviews with neighbors and friends added layers to the emerging narrative. Several witnesses recounted seeing Michael and Ethan arguing earlier that day, their exchanges growing increasingly hostile. One neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, noted, "It wasn't just a playful fight. They looked angry, tense. I thought maybe they were just having a bad day, but it seemed deeper than that." Another teenager from the neighborhood mentioned overhearing Michael say something about making him pay during a brief encounter at school. Michael's insistence on the accidental nature of the injury began to falter under the weight of these findings. When confronted with evidence of the candlestick and the blood patterns, his explanations became vague, often shifting blame or suggesting he had acted in self-defense. His story about a friendly wrestling match collapsed in the face of forensic facts, pointing to a deliberate and violent confrontation. Digital forensics played a crucial role in piecing together the events leading up to the assault. Investigators obtained access to Michael's phone, uncovering a series of text messages exchanged with Ethan and other peers. The tone of these messages revealed a pattern of escalating hostility in the days prior to the attack. Threatening language, insults, and references to settling scores painted a picture of premeditated conflict rather than a spontaneous argument. Moreover, GPS data from Michael's phone placed him at the scene well before the attack, with movements indicating pacing and waiting rather than casual arrival. Internet search history revealed queries about self-defense techniques and how to avoid leaving evidence at a crime scene. These digital footprints suggested a level of planning inconsistent with an accidental injury narrative. Forensic analysis extended to the examination of Michael's clothing and hands. Samples taken from his jacket and gloves contained traces of Ethan's blood, while swabs from Michael's skin revealed no significant presence of his own blood, challenging his claim that he had been injured in the scuffle. This discrepancy pointed toward Michael as the primary aggressor, capable of inflicting harm without sustaining comparable injuries himself. Detective Sanchez also revisited the initial witness interviews, seeking inconsistencies or overlooked details. Some neighbors who had initially described the event as a heated argument now recalled subtle signs of aggression, raised voices, threatening gestures, and a sense of impending violence. A local shopkeeper reported seeing Michael purchasing items consistent with cleaning supplies earlier in the day, raising the possibility of an attempt to erase evidence post-assault. The forensic team's careful reconstruction of the attack sequence suggested that Michael had initiated a confrontation, armed himself with a candlestick, and struck Ethan multiple times. The pattern of defensive wounds on Ethan indicated he had tried to protect himself but was overwhelmed. The broken furniture and disarray in the room aligned with a struggle lasting several minutes, casting doubt on the notion of a quick, accidental fall. Throughout the investigation, Detective Sanchez maintained a steady focus on the objective facts, resisting the temptation to jump to conclusions. She recognized the complexity inherent in adolescent conflicts and the need to differentiate between impulsive acts and calculated violence. Yet the evidence increasingly pointed to a planned and intentional assault, a stark departure from Michael's persistent claims. As the pieces came together, the narrative emerging was one of a confrontation that escalated beyond control, fueled by underlying tensions and possibly pre-existing animosities. The discovery of the weapon, the forensic blood analysis, and the digital evidence combined to build a timeline and motive that challenged the initial police and community assumptions. Meanwhile, medical staff continued to provide updates on Ethan's condition. His injuries required multiple surgeries and a prolonged hospital stay, underscoring the seriousness of the attack. His family, devastated by the violence, cooperated with law enforcement, providing insight into Ethan's recent behavior and relationships that might have contributed to the conflict. Detective Sanchez prepared to present the accumulating evidence to the district attorney's office, anticipating charges that would reflect the severity and intent of the assault. The shift from an accidental injury to a premeditated attack marked a critical juncture in the case, demanding a recalibration of investigative strategies and legal approaches. The community remained divided. Some rallied behind Michael, expressing disbelief at the possibility of intentional harm, while others called for justice for Ethan, emphasizing the need to hold young offenders accountable. Schools initiated discussions on conflict resolution and violence prevention, seeking to address the broader issues highlighted by the incident. Throughout this phase, Detective Sanchez's investigative team worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail was scrutinized, every inconsistency examined, and every lead followed. The evidence gathered at the crime scene and through digital forensics was crucial in transforming a narrative of accidental injury into one that suggested deliberate and planned violence. A revelation that would shape the case's trajectory in the weeks to come. In the weeks following the discovery of the violent assault on Ethan Collins, the quiet suburban community of Maplewood found itself grappling with the unsettling reality that the incident involved two teenagers whose lives had been intertwined long before that fateful evening. Detective Laura Sanchez's investigation had moved beyond the physical evidence to explore the complex social and familial dynamics that shaped the lives of both the victim and the suspect, Michael Harper. Ethan Collins was known in the neighborhood as a bright, athletic 17-year-old with a close circle of friends and a supportive family. His parents, both professionals, had fostered a stable home environment, though recent months had seen Ethan exhibiting signs of stress and withdrawal. Teachers at his high school noted a decline in his academic performance and occasional truancy, but none predicted the violent turn events would take. Friends described him as generally easygoing, but had noticed tension growing between him and Michael, a childhood friend with whom Ethan had shared many memories. Michael Harper's background painted a more complicated picture. Raised by a single mother who worked long hours, Michael had often been left to navigate adolescence with limited supervision. School. Counselors reported that Michael had a history of behavioral issues, ranging from minor disciplinary infractions to more serious incidents involving aggression. Though he was academically capable, his social relationships were fraught with conflict. Peers described him as volatile and quick to anger, yet he maintained a small group of loyal friends who defended him against accusations. Community members were caught off guard by the emerging narrative. Many had viewed Michael as a troubled but redeemable teen, while Ethan was regarded as the unfortunate victim of a tragic accident. As Detective Sanchez delved deeper into their backgrounds, it became clear that the attack on Willow Lane was not an isolated event, but rather the climax of escalating tensions and unresolved conflicts. Interviews with classmates and acquaintances revealed a pattern of hostility between Michael and Ethan. Several peers recounted heated arguments and confrontations in the weeks leading up to the assault. One student recalled a recent altercation during a basketball game where Michael had aggressively challenged Ethan, resulting in a verbal exchange witnessed by several teammates. Another described a social media spat filled with insults and veiled threats, signaling growing animosity. At school, counselors reported concerns about Michael's behavior and emotional state. He had been referred for behavioral interventions and psychological support, though attendance was inconsistent. Teachers noted that Michael often appeared withdrawn, yet prone to sudden outbursts. According to one counselor, Michael was struggling with a lot: family stress, peer pressure, and a sense of isolation. There were warning signs, but it's difficult to predict when someone might cross the line. Detective Sanchez also explored the family dynamics that may have influenced Michael's actions. Interviews with his mother and relatives painted a picture of a young man under considerable pressure. His mother spoke candidly about the challenges of single parenthood, acknowledging that she was sometimes unable to provide the supervision and guidance Michael needed. Friends and neighbors described Michael as someone who craved acceptance, but often found himself on the fringes. In contrast, Ethan's family expressed heartbreak and confusion. They described Ethan as a caring and responsible young man who had recently been navigating the typical struggles of adolescence. His parents spoke of his attempts to mediate conflicts and avoid trouble, making the violence inflicted upon him all the more shocking. "We never imagined something like this could happen," his mother said tearfully. "Ethan was a good kid. He didn't deserve this." The community's response to these revelations was complex. Some residents sympathized with Michael's difficult upbringing, advocating for understanding and support rather than punishment. Others emphasized the need to hold him accountable, arguing that background circumstances could not excuse violent behavior. Local schools and youth organizations began to examine their roles in identifying and addressing warning signs, aiming to prevent future incidents. Detective Sanchez's investigation also uncovered tensions within Michael's social circle. Friends and acquaintances painted a portrait of a teenager influenced by peers who sometimes encouraged reckless and aggressive behavior. Gossip and rumors circulated about Michael's relationships and recent conflicts, though many were difficult to verify. Nevertheless, this social context added depth to the understanding of what may have driven the attack. The more Sanchez learned, the clearer it became that the assault was the result of a complex interplay of personal, social, and emotional factors, rather than a simple spur-of-the-moment event. The lines between victim and aggressor blurred as the investigation highlighted the vulnerabilities and struggles on both sides. Yet the physical violence and its consequences remained stark and undeniable. School officials, aware of the case's impact, initiated programs focused on conflict resolution, mental health awareness, and peer mediation. Workshops and counseling sessions were offered to students, aiming to foster a safer and more supportive environment. Parents were encouraged to engage in conversations with their children about anger management and healthy relationships. Throughout this period, Detective Sanchez maintained communication with both families, providing updates and support as the case progressed. She recognized the emotional toll the investigation was taking on all involved and sought to handle the situation with sensitivity and professionalism. Her goal was not only to uncover the truth, but also to ensure that the process contributed to healing and understanding. As the community absorbed the emerging details, the case sparked broader discussions about adolescent behavior, parental responsibility, and the role of schools and social services in preventing youth violence. Media coverage highlighted the challenges faced by teenagers growing up in complex environments and the critical need for early intervention. In the midst of these developments, Michael continued to assert that the attack had been accidental, though his narrative increasingly conflicted with the evidence and testimonies collected. Detective Sanchez prepared to confront him with the growing body of information that suggested premeditation and intent. The investigation was moving toward a pivotal moment, where the focus would shift from gathering background to establishing motive and culpability. The neighborhood of Maplewood, once known for its tranquility, was now a community wrestling with difficult questions. How had two young men, once friends, come to such a violent crossroads? What had been missed along the way? And what could be done to prevent similar tragedies in the future? Detective Sanchez's work was far from over. As she pieced together the complex human stories behind the assault, she understood that the answers lay not only in forensic evidence, but also in the intricate web of relationships, emotions, and circumstances that shape adolescent lives. The case was evolving from a simple investigation into a profound exploration of youth, conflict, and the fragile boundaries between friendship and violence. As the investigation into the violent assault on Ethan Collins intensified, new evidence emerged that dramatically shifted the trajectory of the case. Detective Laura Sanchez's team uncovered crucial video footage that contradicted Michael Harper's persistent claim that the attack was an accident, revealing a level of preparation and intent that challenged the narrative of a spontaneous altercation. The breakthrough came from a neighbor's security camera, positioned at the edge of the street near Willow Lane. Although the camera did not capture the attack itself, it recorded clear images of Michael's movements in the hour preceding the incident. The footage showed Michael pacing nervously near his home, repeatedly glancing at his phone and appearing to make calls or send messages. More strikingly, the video captured Michael retrieving a dark object from a nearby shed, later identified as the metal candlestick found at the crime scene, and concealing it beneath his jacket. This discovery directly contradicted Michael's earlier statements, denying the presence of any weapon during the confrontation. The footage suggested that Michael had armed himself deliberately, a fact that cast serious doubt on his assertion that the assault was accidental. Detective Sanchez reviewed the video multiple times, noting Michael's tense demeanor and purposeful actions, which implied premeditation rather than a momentary loss of control. Further analysis of the footage revealed that Michael lingered near the victim's house for several minutes before knocking on the door. Shortly after entry, the camera recorded a brief flash of light from a window, consistent with the timing of the attack as established by emergency call logs. Notably, after the incident, Michael was seen exiting the house rapidly, his jacket visibly stained and his posture hurried. supporting the narrative of a calculated assault followed by a swift escape. In addition to the video evidence, forensic experts uncovered more physical clues pointing to premeditation. Gloves found in Michael's bedroom tested positive for blood matching Ethan's DNA, indicating an effort to avoid leaving fingerprints at the scene. The gloves' presence suggested forethought in planning the attack and an attempt to conceal involvement. Investigators also identified a carefully mapped escape route in the backyard, marked by disturbed grass and footprints leading away from the house. Traces of cleaning agents were detected near the back door, consistent with efforts to remove blood evidence. These findings reinforced the theory that Michael had not only planned the assault, but had also prepared to cover his tracks afterward. Digital forensics provided further insight into Michael's intentions. Analysis of his phone records revealed a flurry of activity in the days leading up to the attack, including internet searches on topics such as how to avoid leaving fingerprints, cleaning bloodstains, and self-defense weapons. Text message exchanges with friends included vague references to handling things and making sure it's done right, which, while cryptic, suggested coordination and resolve. When presented with the mounting evidence, Michael's account began to unravel. In subsequent interviews, he struggled to explain the presence of the gloves and the candlestick, initially denying knowledge before eventually conceding that he had taken the object, but maintaining that the confrontation itself was not planned. His inconsistent statements further eroded his credibility. Witnesses from the neighborhood and school painted a picture of escalating hostility between Michael and Ethan. Several friends disclosed that Michael had expressed anger and frustration toward Ethan in private conversations, hinting at a desire to settle a score. These revelations aligned with the digital and physical evidence, suggesting that the attack was not a spontaneous act, but the culmination of growing resentment. Detective Sanchez also uncovered messages on social media platforms where Michael appeared to vent his grievances, posting cryptic comments about betrayal and revenge. While the posts did not explicitly mention Ethan, their timing and tone coincided with the period leading up to the assault, providing context for Michael's mindset. The forensic team's detailed reconstruction of the events indicated that Michael had planned the attack in advance, choosing the weapon, timing, and escape route with careful consideration. The presence of gloves and cleaning agents underscored his intent to avoid detection, suggesting a level of sophistication uncommon in adolescent offenders. Throughout the investigation, Detective Sanchez remained mindful of Michael's age and the psychological complexities of adolescent behavior. She consulted with experts in juvenile psychology who explained that teenagers are capable of both impulsive acts and calculated decisions, often influenced by peer pressure and emotional turmoil. This understanding informed the approach to Michael's interrogation and the handling of evidence. The evidence gathered at this stage transformed the case from a tragic accident into a serious criminal matter with clear indications of premeditation. Prosecutors were briefed on the findings, and preparations began for formal charges reflecting the severity and intent of the assault. The community's reaction to the revelation of premeditation was mixed. Some residents expressed shock and disappointment, struggling to reconcile the image of Michael as a troubled but redeemable youth with the evidence of deliberate violence. Others felt vindicated in their calls for accountability and justice on behalf of Ethan. Local schools intensified efforts to address the underlying issues highlighted by the case, including conflict resolution training and mental health support. The incident sparked conversations among parents, educators, and students about the warning signs of escalating aggression and the importance of intervention before conflicts reach a dangerous point. Meanwhile, Ethan's family continued to cope with the aftermath of the attack, drawing strength from the community support and the progress in the investigation. They expressed gratitude for the thoroughness of the authorities and the commitment to uncovering the truth. Detective Sanchez prepared to move forward with the case, aware that the evidence of premeditation would be central to the forthcoming legal proceedings. The discovery of the video footage and forensic findings had shifted the focus from questions of accident to questions of intent, setting the stage for a complex and challenging prosecution. As the investigation advanced, the case of Michael Harper and Ethan Collins became emblematic of the difficulties in discerning motive and responsibility in adolescent violence. The interplay of physical evidence, digital footprints, and social dynamics underscored the multifaceted nature of the crime and the meticulous work required to bring clarity to a community shaken by tragedy. Detective Sanchez's team continued to analyze every detail, determined to build a comprehensive picture that would withstand scrutiny in court. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but the emergence of decisive evidence marked a turning point in the pursuit of justice for Ethan Collins. As the investigation into the assault on Ethan Collins deepened, Detective Laura Sanchez turned her focus toward understanding the underlying motives behind Michael Harper's actions. The evidence gathered thus far painted a troubling picture of premeditation. But the question remained: what had driven a 16-year-old to commit such a violent act against a peer? Uncovering Michael's motive became a critical step in constructing a comprehensive case and providing answers to a community desperate for clarity. Interviews with Michael's friends and acquaintances revealed a growing pattern of hostility and resentment directed toward Ethan in the weeks leading up to the attack. Several peers described a shift in Michael's behavior. Once relatively amiable, he had become increasingly withdrawn, irritable, and prone to outbursts. One close friend confided that Michael had felt betrayed by Ethan over a personal dispute involving social circles and loyalties. Michael kept saying Ethan was turning people against him, that he was being left out, the friend said. There was a lot of anger brewing. Social media platforms offered further insight into the escalating tension. Text messages and posts uncovered by investigators revealed a series of increasingly hostile exchanges between Michael and Ethan. Michael's messages included accusations of betrayal and threats veiled in sarcasm and coded language. One message read, "You think you can just walk away? Not this time." Another stated, "I'm done playing games." These communications suggested that the conflict was deeply personal and had been festering over an extended period. Detective Sanchez and her team also spoke with teachers and school counselors who had observed the boys' interactions. They reported that while both had been involved in occasional disputes, recent months had seen a marked intensification in their antagonism. A guidance counselor noted, "There was a clear rift developing. Michael seemed consumed by frustration and jealousy, while Ethan appeared increasingly cautious and distant." The investigation uncovered additional details about the social dynamics influencing Michael's behavior. Friends recounted that Michael had faced bullying and exclusion within certain peer groups, contributing to feelings of isolation and humiliation. In some conversations, Michael expressed a desire for revenge, fueled by perceived slights and a growing sense of injustice. Further complicating the picture were reports of Michael's associations with a small group of older teens known for aggressive behavior. While there was no evidence that these individuals directly incited the assault, their influence appeared significant in shaping Michael's mindset. Text messages exchanged within this group contained suggestions of handling problems decisively and warnings against showing weakness. The discovery of these social pressures helped explain the shift from verbal confrontations to physical violence. Michael's frustration and anger, compounded by peer influences, seemed to have reached a boiling point. The attack on Ethan emerged not as a random act, but as a calculated response to perceived betrayal and ongoing conflict. In addition to external influences, personal factors played a role. Interviews with family members revealed that Michael had been struggling with underlying emotional challenges, including anxiety and feelings of inadequacy. His mother described recent changes in his demeanor, noting a growing withdrawal and difficulty managing stress. Friends echoed this, mentioning that Michael often felt misunderstood and unsupported. Detective Sanchez also uncovered evidence that Michael had researched methods of intimidation and self-defense online, reflecting a preoccupation with control and power. These findings were corroborated by internet search histories and text exchanges that indicated an intent to prepare for confrontation. Throughout the inquiry, Michael maintained a narrative that minimized his responsibility, framing the attack as a reaction to provocation and a momentary loss of control. However, the accumulated evidence suggested a more deliberate and sustained intent to harm. The juxtaposition of his statements with the forensic and digital findings highlighted the complexity of his motives. The investigation's revelations sparked intense discussions within the community and among legal experts about the factors contributing to juvenile violence. Experts consulted by Detective Sanchez emphasized the interplay of social rejection, peer pressure, and emotional distress in shaping adolescent behavior. They noted that while such factors do not excuse violent acts, understanding them is crucial for prevention and rehabilitation. Local schools responded by increasing efforts to address bullying, social exclusion, and mental health support. Programs aimed at fostering empathy, communication skills, and conflict resolution were expanded, reflecting a commitment to addressing root causes rather than symptoms. Meanwhile, the victim's family grappled with the painful knowledge of the motives behind the attack. While shocked by the depth of hostility revealed, they expressed a desire to understand the circumstances that led to their son's suffering. Their statements to the press called for healing and reconciliation, urging the community to come together to prevent similar tragedies. Detective Sanchez prepared to present the motive findings to the district attorney, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the assault rooted in personal vendettas and social dynamics. The motive became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case, underpinning charges of assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. As the case moved toward formal charges, the complexities of adolescent psychology and social influence remained central themes. The investigation underscored the need for comprehensive approaches that combine law enforcement, mental health services, and community engagement. In Maplewood, the case of Michael Harper and Ethan Collins served as a catalyst for reflection on the pressures facing youth today. It highlighted the fragile boundaries between friendship and enmity, the consequences of unresolved conflict, and the urgent necessity for systems that support young people before anger turns to violence. Detective Sanchez continued her work with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to ensure that the evidence of motive and intent would inform not only the legal process, but also broader efforts to safeguard the community's youth. The path ahead promised to be challenging, but the clarity gained in understanding why the attack occurred marked a significant step toward justice and prevention. Following the uncovering of motive and mounting evidence suggesting premeditation, the legal process accelerated as authorities prepared to formally charge Michael Harper. On a chilly morning in late March 2024, Michael was taken into custody, facing charges of assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. The gravity of the accusations marked a pivotal moment not only in the investigation, but also in the lives of everyone involved. The community braced itself for the difficult road ahead, as the legal system sought to balance justice with the complexities surrounding adolescent offenders. At the police station, Michael underwent a comprehensive psychological evaluation as part of the standard procedure for juvenile suspects facing serious charges. Dr. Rebecca Lyons, a forensic psychologist specializing in adolescent behavior, conducted multiple sessions aimed at assessing Michael's mental state, cognitive development, and capacity for understanding the consequences of his actions. Throughout the evaluation, Michael presented as guarded and reserved, often avoiding direct eye contact. He appeared to grapple with conflicting emotions, remorse intermingled with defensiveness and frustration. Dr. Lyons noted that while Michael demonstrated average intellectual abilities, his emotional regulation was impaired, characterized by impulsivity and difficulty managing anger. These traits, common in adolescence, were compounded by environmental stressors and social pressures. The evaluation also explored Michael's capacity for planning and forethought. Dr. Lyons concluded that despite his youth, Michael possessed the cognitive ability to understand the nature and severity of his actions. The presence of deliberate behaviors, such as arming himself with the candlestick, wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, and attempting to clean the crime scene, indicated a level of intentionality inconsistent with impulsive or accidental conduct. However, the psychologist also emphasized Michael's developmental stage, highlighting that adolescents often struggle with impulse control and decision-making under emotional distress. This duality underscored the challenge facing the legal system. Determining the extent to which Michael's age and psychological maturity should influence his criminal responsibility. Legal counsel was appointed to represent Michael, with defense attorneys preparing a strategy that would take these psychological findings into account. They aimed to argue for diminished capacity, suggesting that Michael's emotional and cognitive immaturity impaired his judgment and reduced his culpability. The defense highlighted factors such as peer pressure, family dynamics, and mental health struggles as mitigating circumstances. Meanwhile, the prosecution built a case focused on the deliberate nature of the assault. Prosecutors pointed to the extensive evidence of planning and intent, arguing that Michael's actions transcended youthful recklessness. They emphasized the severity of Ethan's injuries and the impact on the victim and his family, advocating for accountability commensurate with the harm caused. Throughout pre-trial preparations, Detective Sanchez provided detailed testimony and reports outlining the investigative findings, forensic evidence, and psychological assessments. Her role was critical in bridging the factual evidence with the legal arguments to come. The community followed the case closely, with public opinion divided. Some residents sympathized with Michael's difficult background and supported efforts to consider his age and mental state in sentencing. Others demanded justice for Ethan, emphasizing the need for consequences that reflect the severity of the crime. In parallel with legal proceedings, efforts were made to provide Michael with psychological support. Juvenile detention facilities arranged for counseling services aimed at addressing anger management and emotional regulation. Experts stressed the importance of rehabilitation alongside accountability, particularly for young offenders whose brains and behaviors are still developing. The complexity of handling juvenile offenders was apparent in every facet of the case. The legal system had to navigate between protecting public safety, ensuring a fair trial, and recognizing the potential for rehabilitation. This delicate balance was the subject of ongoing debates among lawmakers, psychologists, and community advocates. For Michael's family, the proceedings were a source of profound anguish and uncertainty. His mother expressed hope that the legal process would consider her son's struggles and provide him with an opportunity to learn and grow. At the same time, she acknowledged the seriousness of the charges and the need for consequences. Ethan's family remained focused on their son's recovery, while also seeking justice through the legal system. They expressed a desire for transparency and fairness, hoping that the case would send a clear message about the consequences of violence. As the trial date approached, both defense and prosecution prepared to present their cases before the juvenile court. Expert witnesses, including forensic psychologists, social workers, and educators, were lined up to provide testimony on adolescent development, behavioral patterns, and the circumstances surrounding the assault. Detective Sanchez continued to assist with case preparation, mindful of the responsibility to ensure that the evidence was presented accurately and comprehensively. She understood that the outcome of the trial would resonate beyond the courtroom, influencing community perceptions and future approaches to juvenile crime. The psychological evaluation and legal strategies underscored the multifaceted nature of the case. Michael Harper was not simply a perpetrator or a victim of circumstance. He was a young individual caught in a web of personal struggles, social influences, and critical choices. The justice system faced the challenge of addressing this complexity while upholding the principles of accountability and public safety. As the courtroom preparations intensified, the community of Maplewood braced for the trial that would determine Michael's fate. The case had already sparked important conversations about youth violence, mental health, and the capacity for change. Now, all eyes turned toward the legal process, where the balance between justice and compassion would be tested in the months to come. The courtroom in the County Juvenile Justice Center was packed with family members, community residents, and local media as the trial of Michael Harper commenced in early summer 2024. The proceedings marked a significant moment for Maplewood, a community still grappling with the shock of the brutal assault on Ethan Collins and seeking resolution through the legal process. The case, complex and emotionally charged, centered on whether Michael's actions were premeditated and intentional, or the tragic result of adolescent impulsivity. Prosecutors opened their case by outlining the evidence gathered over months of investigation. Lead attorney Karen Mitchell presented a compelling narrative supported by forensic findings, digital footprints, and eyewitness testimony. The prosecution emphasized the deliberate nature of the assault, Michael's retrieval and concealment of the candlestick weapon, his use of gloves to avoid detection, and his calculated escape route. These facts, Mitchell argued, demonstrated clear intent and planning. Mitchell also highlighted the digital evidence, the internet searches for cleaning blood and avoiding fingerprints, the hostile text messages exchanged with Ethan, and the surveillance footage capturing Michael's movements prior to the attack. This was not a momentary lapse or an accident, Mitchell declared to the jury. It was a calculated act of violence with devastating consequences. The prosecution called upon forensic experts who detailed the nature of Ethan's injuries, explaining how the multiple blunt force traumas were inconsistent with accidental harm. Blood spatter analysts described the patterns that indicated repeated strikes and defensive wounds, reinforcing the narrative of an assault rather than a fall. Next, digital forensic specialists testified about the incriminating online searches and text messages, connecting Michael's pre-attack behavior to the evidence found at the scene. Their testimony painted a picture of a teenager who had researched how to commit and conceal a violent act, contradicting his claims of innocence. The defense, led by attorney James Carter, countered with a strategy focused on Michael's youth, emotional state, and impaired judgment. Carter argued that the evidence, while substantial, should be interpreted in the context of adolescent psychology. He called expert witnesses, psychologists and behavioral specialists, who testified about the developmental challenges faced by teenagers, including impulse control difficulties and susceptibility to peer pressure. Dr. Emily Ross, a clinical psychologist, explained to the court that while Michael had the cognitive ability to understand consequences, his emotional regulation was compromised by stress and environmental factors. Adolescents often struggle to foresee the outcomes of their actions fully, Ross testified. Michael's behavior reflects a youthful capacity for poor decision-making, influenced by complex social and emotional dynamics. The defense presented Michael's own testimony, during which he maintained that the assault was not premeditated. He described the confrontation as escalating rapidly, claiming he had intended only to defend himself after a verbal argument turned physical. Michael admitted to bringing the candlestick into the house, but insisted it was for protection, not as a planned weapon. His account painted a picture of confusion and fear rather than calculated aggression. Throughout his testimony, Michael appeared nervous yet resolute, attempting to convey remorse while distancing himself from the full weight of responsibility. His defense team emphasized his troubled background and the lack of malicious intent, urging the jury to consider the possibility of diminished capacity. The prosecution rebutted by underscoring the discrepancies between Michael's testimony and the physical evidence. They pointed to the gloves, the cleaning attempts, and the precise timing of the assault as indicators of deliberate planning. Prosecutor Mitchell reminded the jury of the impact on Ethan, his critical injuries, and the trauma endured by his family. Throughout the trial, expert witnesses engaged in debates about adolescent psychology and criminal intent. The prosecution's psychologists argued that Michael's actions went beyond impulsivity, reflecting deliberate choices. The defense's experts highlighted the adolescent brain's ongoing development, suggesting a reduced degree of culpability. Community members attended the trial daily, their reactions mirroring the case's complexity. Some expressed sympathy for Michael, recognizing the challenges of youth and the potential for rehabilitation. Others focused on justice for Ethan, emphasizing the need for accountability and consequences. The trial also brought to light broader societal questions about juvenile justice, how to balance punishment with the opportunity for growth, how to interpret adolescent behavior in the context of serious crimes. Legal analysts following the case noted its potential to influence future policies on handling violent offenses committed by minors. As closing arguments approached, both sides appealed to the jury's sense of fairness and responsibility. The prosecution urged the jury to recognize the weight of evidence demonstrating premeditation and intentional harm. The defense implored the jury to consider Michael's age, psychological state, and potential for reform. Judge Karen Whitman presided over the proceedings with measured authority, ensuring that the trial adhered to legal standards and that both parties received a fair hearing. Her instructions to the jury emphasized the importance of carefully weighing all evidence and considering the nuances of adolescent development in their deliberations. Outside the courtroom, community leaders organized discussions and forums to address the issues raised by the case. Schools increased efforts in violence prevention and mental health support, while parents sought guidance on recognizing warning signs and fostering healthy communication with their children. For Detective Laura Sanchez, the trial represented the culmination of months of painstaking work. Her detailed reports and testimony had been instrumental in presenting a clear and comprehensive case. Yet, she remained aware that the verdict would not only determine Michael's fate, but also shape the community's understanding of youth violence and justice. As the trial moved into its final phase, the tension in Maplewood was palpable. The case had stirred deep emotions and complex debates, reflecting the broader challenges of addressing serious crimes among adolescents. The jury's decision, expected in the coming days, would carry significant implications for all involved. Throughout the proceedings, the narrative of Michael Harper's actions had evolved from claims of accidental harm to a portrayal of deliberate violence tempered by youthful fragility. The trial illuminated the delicate balance between accountability and compassion, highlighting the pressing need for justice systems equipped to handle the complexities of adolescent offenders. As the courtroom prepared for closing statements, the community awaited a verdict that would bring clarity and closure to a case that had shaken the foundations of a once peaceful neighborhood. The jury's deliberation in the trial of Michael Harper stretched over 2 tense days in late July 2024, as the 12 jurors wrestled with the weight of evidence and the complexities of adolescent culpability. In the small, packed courtroom of the County Juvenile Justice Center, the community awaited a verdict that would not only determine Michael's fate, but also reflect the broader societal struggle to balance justice and understanding in cases involving youth violence. Foremost in the jury's considerations was the extensive body of evidence presented by the prosecution, which depicted a calculated and intentional assault on Ethan Collins. The forensic testimony had painted a vivid picture of premeditation. The weapon concealed prior to the attack, the use of gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, and the deliberate attempts to clean blood from the crime scene. Digital forensics further corroborated this narrative, revealing internet searches and hostile communications that suggested planning and intent. Yet the defense's arguments had introduced critical nuances. Expert witnesses on adolescent psychology emphasized the developmental challenges facing teenagers like Michael: impaired impulse control, emotional volatility, and susceptibility to peer pressure. Michael's own testimony, marked by remorse and claims of diminished capacity, added a human dimension to the legal debate, reminding jurors that behind the evidence was a young person still grappling with the consequences of his actions. As the jury deliberated, community members followed the process with bated breath. The case had become a focal point for discussions about juvenile justice, the adequacy of rehabilitation programs, and the appropriate balance between punishment and mercy. Local forums and media outlets debated whether Michael's age and background warranted leniency, or if the severity of the crime necessitated a firm sentence. Inside the deliberation room, jurors grappled with the challenge of interpreting complex psychological testimony alongside hard forensic facts. Some argued that the evidence of planning and concealment outweighed considerations of youthfulness, insisting that Michael's actions were deliberate and deserved serious consequences. Others advocated for leniency, emphasizing the importance of recognizing adolescent development and the potential for rehabilitation. The jurors' task was complicated by the legal standards they were required to apply. The judge's instructions clarified that while Michael's age could be considered in sentencing, the charges, assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, reflected the nature of the crime itself. The jury had to determine guilt based on evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, balancing factual findings with the moral implications of their verdict. After extensive discussion, the jury returned to the courtroom to deliver their decision. Foreperson Rebecca Hayes stood and announced the verdict: guilty of assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. The courtroom was silent for a moment, the weight of the words settling over those present. Judge Karen Whitman then moved to sentencing, considering the unique circumstances of the case. She acknowledged Michael's youth, troubled background, and psychological evaluations, noting these factors in weighing an appropriate penalty. However, she also recognized the gravity of the crime and its impact on Ethan Collins and his family. Michael was sentenced to a term in juvenile detention, with provisions for psychological counseling, educational programs, and rehabilitation efforts aimed at addressing his behavioral issues and facilitating reintegration into society. The judge emphasized the dual goals of accountability and the potential for growth, reflecting the court's commitment to both justice and compassion. Statements from the victim's family were poignant and heartfelt. Ethan's mother spoke of the pain and fear the attack had inflicted, but also expressed hope that justice served would contribute to healing. "We want our son to recover and live a full life," she said, "and we hope this sentence reminds others that violence has serious consequences." Michael's family issued a statement acknowledging the verdict and expressing a desire for their son to receive support and guidance during his incarceration. Their message highlighted the challenges faced by families dealing with troubled youth and the importance of community resources. The community's reaction was mixed but thoughtful. Some residents praised the court's balanced approach, recognizing the need to hold Michael accountable while providing opportunities for rehabilitation. Others felt the sentence was either too harsh or too lenient, reflecting the ongoing debate about juvenile justice and appropriate responses to youth violence. In the weeks following the sentencing, local schools and organizations renewed efforts to address the underlying issues revealed by the case. Violence prevention programs, mental health services, and peer mediation initiatives were expanded, aiming to reduce the risk of similar incidents. The case became a catalyst for community engagement and policy discussions. Michael began his sentence in a juvenile detention facility equipped with educational and therapeutic programs. Psychological counseling focused on anger management, emotional regulation, and social skills, seeking to address the factors that had contributed to his actions. Educational classes aimed to keep him on track academically, providing a pathway toward future opportunities. Throughout his incarceration, Michael underwent regular evaluations to monitor his progress and readiness for reintegration. His case became part of broader studies and discussions about effective interventions for juvenile offenders, informing ongoing reforms in the justice system. Detective Laura Sanchez continued to follow the case, reflecting on the investigation's challenges and the trial's outcomes. She recognized the importance of thorough, evidence-based work in securing justice while remaining sensitive to the complexities of adolescent behavior. The trial and sentencing of Michael Harper sparked national conversations about juvenile crime, mental health, and the role of the legal system in addressing violent acts committed by minors. Advocates for reform used the case to argue for increased resources in schools and communities, emphasizing prevention and early intervention. As Maplewood sought to heal from the trauma of the assault, the case stood as a sobering reminder of the fragile line between youthful mistakes and serious criminal acts. The community's response demonstrated a commitment to learning from tragedy, fostering safety, and supporting its young people. While the legal chapter had reached a conclusion, the story of Michael and Ethan continued to resonate. Their lives, forever altered by that night on Willow Lane, became a focal point for reflection on justice, accountability, and the complex nature of adolescence in a troubled world. In the months following Michael Harper's sentencing, the quiet suburb of Maplewood began a slow and painful process of healing and reflection. The violent assault on Ethan Collins had left deep scars, not only on the victim and his family, but on the entire community. As Ethan embarked on a difficult road to recovery, and Michael adjusted to life within the juvenile justice system, Maplewood confronted the broader implications of the tragedy, sparking initiatives aimed at prevention, education, and support for its youth. Ethan's recovery was arduous. The injuries he sustained required multiple surgeries and extensive physical therapy. His family rallied around him, determined to provide the care and encouragement necessary for his rehabilitation. Despite the physical and emotional toll, Ethan showed remarkable resilience. Local support groups, counseling services, and community fundraisers underscored the collective commitment to his well-being. Yet, the trauma endured lingered, a constant reminder of the night that had shattered the neighborhood's peace. Meanwhile, Michael's life had transformed dramatically. The juvenile detention center became both a place of consequence and opportunity. Structured programs focused on education, psychological counseling, and behavioral therapy aimed to address the underlying issues that had contributed to his actions. Michael grappled with the reality of his sentence, the weight of his guilt, and the challenge of personal growth within the constraints of incarceration. His psychological evaluations highlighted ongoing struggles with impulse control and emotional regulation, but also moments of insight and progress. Participation in anger management and conflict resolution groups offered a glimpse of hope for rehabilitation. The facility's educational programs sought to keep him engaged academically, providing a foundation for eventual reintegration into society. The case continued to resonate beyond individual lives, influencing Maplewood's approach to youth violence and community safety. Schools adopted comprehensive violence prevention curricula, emphasizing social-emotional learning, peer mediation, and early identification of at-risk students. Mental health services expanded, with counselors and social workers playing proactive roles in supporting students and families. Community organizations launched initiatives aimed at fostering safe spaces and constructive outlets for young people. After-school programs, sports leagues, and mentorship opportunities sought to build connections and resilience, addressing factors that often contribute to adolescent aggression. Parents and caregivers participated in workshops focused on communication, conflict resolution, and recognizing warning signs. Law enforcement agencies collaborated with social services and educators to develop multidisciplinary strategies for intervention and support. These efforts reflected a commitment to preventing future tragedies by addressing the complex web of social, emotional, and environmental influences on youth behavior. The case also spurred dialogue at the state and national levels about juvenile justice reform. Advocates highlighted the need for balanced approaches that ensure accountability while promoting rehabilitation and recognizing developmental science. Michael's trial and sentencing became a reference point in discussions about appropriate sentencing guidelines, mental health resources, and alternatives to incarceration. Media coverage of the case continued to evolve, shifting from sensationalism to thoughtful analysis. Commentators explored themes of adolescent psychology, family dynamics, and community responsibility. The story of Michael and Ethan became emblematic of the challenges faced by many communities grappling with youth violence, shining a light on both the failures and possibilities within existing systems. Throughout this period, Detective Laura Sanchez remained engaged, often participating in community forums and educational events. She shared insights from the investigation and trial, emphasizing the importance of vigilance, early intervention, and comprehensive support networks. Her work extended beyond enforcement, embodying a commitment to prevention and healing. The families of both Michael and Ethan navigated their own journeys of grief, forgiveness, and resilience. While their paths were marked by pain and loss, moments of dialogue and understanding occasionally emerged, underscoring the complex human emotions intertwined with justice and healing. Maplewood itself transformed in response to the tragedy. Neighborhood watch programs strengthened, community centers expanded youth outreach, and local leaders prioritized investments in mental health and education. The collective experience forged a renewed sense of solidarity and responsibility among residents. Yet, the shadow of that February night lingered, a somber reminder of how quickly lives could change and communities could be shaken. The assault on Ethan Collins remained a defining event in Maplewood's history, shaping conversations about safety, youth, and justice for years to come. In the quiet moments, amid recovery and reform, the story of two teenagers, one victim, one offender, continued to unfold. Their lives, forever altered, became a testament to the complexities of adolescence, the consequences of violence, and the enduring struggle to balance accountability with compassion. As time passed, the community's hope rested on the belief that from tragedy could arise understanding, that support could foster change, and that the lessons learned would help prevent future violence. The legacy of the case endured not only in court records and news reports, but in the hearts and minds of those determined to build a safer, more compassionate future for the youth of Maplewood and beyond.